I'm Julianne Ballou. I was the project manager of the Gabriel Garcia Marquez online archive.
I'm Nicolas Pernet. I'm here as a Ransom Center Fellow doing a research on Garcia Marquez's archives. I'm here to talk about my project and the legacy of Garcia Marquez with Julianne today.
And we're so glad that you've joined us on what would have been Garcia Marquez's 91st birthday. We will talk about the digital archive at the Ransom Center as well as the collection. We'll talk about Nicolas's work at the National Library of Colombia. And we'll also talk about Gabriel Garcia Marquez's legacy and how readers continue to come to his works and to celebrate his memory.
Yes, and we'll take questions from you if you want to talk about it online on Facebook. So I want to talk about my project here. To start with, and that's a good point because I've been here for a month doing a research on Garcia Marquez's archive. It's been great. The Ransom Center is a really nice institution in many ways. And I was lucky enough to get a grant from the Ransom Center. I applied in 2016. And well, the important thing, like in any project, is to have like a good project and a very concise idea of what I wanted to do. And I wrote a project about how we can approach Garcia Marquez as a reader from his archives. And I've been doing that since then, trying to pick some clues or some indications of what he read, because especially when he was like an older person now, after the success of his books, because we know about Garcia Marquez as a reader when he was a young man. Mm-hmm. Like many students, he got into literature, he fell in love with some writers, and in many occasions he spoke of his love for certain authors like Kafka, like James Joyce, like William Faulkner, but we don't really know what he read like in the 60s, 70s, 80s, a period when he was like much older and way more famous. So I found it very interesting to do that, to know Garcia Marquez in that way, and also to use Garcia Marquez as a door to get to other authors and to other topics, because it's not just about reading Garcia Marquez, but also it's like a way to understand his time and the 20th century from his point of view. So it's been really interesting.
So one thing that I've kind of been fascinated about in having conversations with you about your work is that you're the first visiting fellow who had the opportunity visiting fellow researching Garcia Marquez, who also had the opportunity to use the online collection before you came. So you read his papers online, but you're interested in large parts of his collection that haven't been digitized, yes. Including his library and some of the correspondence in the collection. So can you tell me a little bit about maybe what you expected to find based on what you saw among the online papers versus how your interest in the archive has possibly grown, and the parts of the physical archive that you've really found yourself surprised by?
Yes, it's true. As you mentioned, last December, a big part of his archives went online, and I had the opportunity to read some of the novels, especially because I was so intrigued about the different drafts he had in his archive. But I knew that there was a big part of the archive that was not online, and especially the correspondence, which is huge actually, and also the books from his library, many photos as well. So yeah, it's been like an opportunity to see that part that is not part of the online archive. That maybe later you can talk to us about that. But the nice thing about the correspondence is that you see that he was really interested in many readings regarding his friends and some people close to him. In his correspondence, we can see that he was a really interested person in the in the political events of Latin America. So he comments on certain things he read on magazines, on newspapers. So I found that he was a really big newspapers and magazine reader, for instance. That's something that when he got into a place where he was really politically very active, he really started to read a lot of magazines, and he was a journalist, so for him that was very important. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that the Ransom Center has that is really important is a big part of his library. Mm-hmm. And many of his books, they have like some notes he took when he read them. And that was really interesting because then you can see what things he paid attention to. And some books, many of the books are related to history because he wrote in the 1980s 2 novels very close related to history. Love in the Times of Cholera and The General in His Labyrinth, that is about Simón Bolívar, the liberator of many countries in Latin America. So to see his books and to see that he had a huge collection of history books, and he really paid attention to some topics. For instance, he didn't, and you can see that he was really interested in like small details of history, like Bolivar's height, or what music he liked, or what was the weather like someday. So he thought as a novelist, somebody who is interested in knowing little details of history. So to see he used those books as a tool to get some details correct, it's been really interesting, and that could only have been possible here because those books are not online, as you mentioned. So I'm sure a big part of the archives are online and that are really interesting to read, but also a visit to the Ransom Center is a great opportunity.
Just out of curiosity, is there anything that you feel is missing from the archive? Do you sense any gaps? I know Garcia Marquez is kind of known to have destroyed earlier drafts, so we have a lot of later drafts of his works. But aside from that, is there anything that perhaps you hoped to find but might still kind of be outstanding?
Well, surely there are many things in his house still that we as a scholar would like to read and see, but we cannot ask the family to give us everything. They've been very generous in giving a big part of his archives, not only to the Ransom Center. They also donated books to the National Library in Colombia, and they donated books to other libraries in his country as well, and they donated his Nobel Prize medal, his typewriter, so many things. But I'm particularly interested, for instance, in many of his books. A big part of them is here, but there must be more books in his house that would be interesting to see. I'm particularly really interested in his record collection, actually, because that wasn't part of the archive that came to the Ransom Center, and I understand why. But he was a music lover, and he had like a really big record collection, and he devoted many hours of his life to listen to music, to talk about music. So that would be really interesting to have like an access at least to the titles or the artists that he listened to. That would be like a new part of the research in future years. But so far it's really great. And also, we all miss his letters, the ones he wrote. Yeah. Because there are many letters he received, and there are some correspondence, especially with Plinio Mendoza and with Guillermo Angulo, 2 of his friends. But it's known that he didn't write that many letters, that he preferred telephone to talk to friends, and that some of his letters got lost or maybe were destroyed after read. So we all miss that, but I guess we will never be able to find them. But it's best to focus on what we do have than to lament the things we don't have.
Right, no, that's a great point. That's a good approach to take. So speaking about materials that are in different repositories or different institutions, you have Garcia Marquez, his journalism and some other works or some other materials at the National Library of Colombia that you work with.
Yes.
Can you say a little bit about that?
Yes, after Garcia Marquez died, obviously in Colombia, many institutions wanted to use his legacy to promote reading. For instance, it's a big thing for the National Library to use Garcia Marquez's legacy to promote reading in kids and young people. So after he died, we took a big part of our collection. In the National Library of Colombia, I mean, there are all his, the newspapers where he worked, where he wrote. Also, I mean, we have all his books, obviously in Spanish, but we also have like a really interesting collection of translations of Garcia Marquez. That's interesting because I would say like the biggest translations collection I've seen is in Bogota, especially because when he won the Nobel Prize, the president of that time asked many embassies to donate a book in their language to the National Library of Colombia. So now we have more than 38 languages there of many books. And all that, I mean, we thought of a way to guide readers, because when we approach Garcia Marquez, maybe it's easy to focus on his main novels. I mean, Love in Times of Cholera, 100 Years of Solitude. But he wrote many books, including novels, short stories, journalism. He has a play. He wrote movie scripts. There are books with his interviews. Yeah. So the quantity of Garcia Marquez's books is huge. So at the National Library, we thought about creating some guidance for readers that want to approach Garcia Marquez and to read him maybe for the first time. So we created this website called La Gaboteca, the Gabotech. It's like a way to guide readers actually. So what can they find? What are they looking for? I mean, do they want short stories? Are they interested in more like theater or interviews? And the website gives them like a guide how to approach those readings. So basically all we've done since then, it's been like an invitation to reread Garcia Marquez and also to read different authors that he liked, that he enjoyed. I mean, to use him as a way for people to read other authors as well, not only to focus on him. So it's been kind of the main interest of our work there in Colombia, yeah.
So one thing that was unique about the online archive that we create at the Ransom Center is that it's over 28,000 pages of Garcia Marquez's drafts, of photographs, of scrapbooks that his wife Mercedes created, that are kind of collections of press clippings about him and interviews that he did, and excerpts of his works from magazines. And I believe it might be the largest digital collection of works that are currently under copyright. And we were able to put them online with the generous permission of his family. But we're talking about reading these works on a screen versus it seems like the kind of reading that the National Library of Colombia is guiding is toward the books. And that's the type of reading that you've really been doing at the Ransom Center by going through books in his library. So how do you think that an online archive, will it change the way that we read Garcia Marquez? Do you think that it will change his legacy? I assume that school children will still be introduced to the physical books. But can you imagine a time when we're reading Garcia Marquez online?
Yeah, completely. I mean, he was really interested in new technologies. I mean, he wasn't like against new technologies or anything like that. In fact, when he created this foundation for new journalism in Cartagena, he wanted journalists to be really into the new media of the internet and all this digital media, and for him that wasn't like a big problem. He wrote many of his novels in computers. Some of them are here too. I mean, the computers he used in the 80s and 90s are here, so it's been really interesting to see. And I don't think he had any problem about changing of the times. I mean, he was in many aspects an innovator. When he was in 1953 or 52, he was in Cartagena actually, and he created a small newspaper that was like the size of a half a page. He wrote the whole newspaper and he delivered the newspaper for free on the street. So for me, it's like an example of early microblogging and free newspapers. So he didn't have any problem in creating new supports for his work. So I think the internet is such an amazing thing, and it really relates to his work, because as we know, Garcia Marquez and many Latin American novelists dealt with magic, with the idea of the infinite universe in just one place, to have a whole story just in one book, like the universe entire just in a book. So in a way, internet is that. So to see his work or Jorge Luis Borges's work online is like to really find the place where all these magical things that you can see in their work can be read online. So for me, it's not something strange or different than the paper. And also, for instance, the internet gives the opportunity like for people to respond to the readings. For instance, this foundation I mentioned for new journalism, la FNPI in Cartagena, created a website where people can write their memories on when they met Garcia Marquez, for instance. Or and post a picture of them with Garcia Marquez, or also just tell the story about when they read Garcia Marquez for the first time. So this interactive thing with the readers is something that the internet is really good for. So I think it's great to have that kind of things, especially with an author that many people liked, enjoyed, and loved. So many of them, they want to express their love for Garcia Marquez. So I think internet is perfect. And today we have like a Garcia Marquez's doodle on Google, right?
That's right.
Right. So I think they can go very close together without any problem.
Okay.
Like you did at the Ransom Center, because I find really interesting that archives you put online, and especially, the thing about being able to compare different versions of the novel. I mean, to have this software that allows us to read the different versions, for me is really interesting. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, the software that Nicolas is talking about is Merador. So we have implemented the Merador image viewer at the Ransom Center. Kind of was part of the grant project, but you're able to use it with all of our digital collections. And what it allows researchers to do is to compare multiple pages from different drafts from the same work, for example, on the same screen, and to even edit those images. So you can make the images lighter or darker. You can bring in images from different repositories that are using the IIIF technology that is supported by the Merador image viewer. And I think that it's a wonderful opportunity to possibly collaborate with other institutions that have Garcia Marquez's works that are willing to digitize the materials and put them online.
Yes.
Can you talk about, you've used it a little bit.
Yes, and I think it's very important. it's great because you can see different versions of the novels, different drafts, and then you can realize that just changing a paragraph and taking it out of one place and put it in another place makes a big difference. And you see for Garcia Marquez, he was really interested in having some episodes in the right place, because many of his books talk about reminiscence of the past. So to have to remember something in this chapter is different from doing it in another chapter. So that software is great to see how in different chapters of his works, maybe there is this episode that is no longer here. So the only way to see that actually in that part of the book that episode is not there is to compare both drafts, and the software is perfect for that. So I think it's a really good thing for many researchers and writers as well. I mean, because Garcia Marquez can teach them a lot about how he liked to organize his work while he was writing. And the thing you mentioned too, I mean, I think with this project of showing Garcia Marquez online, you opened like a door like that may be followed by many institutions, like and for many writers as well, to use internet as a way to approach archives of authors. And like in a way, we all are living in a world that we show our archives online. I mean, we share pictures, we share many things online. So the idea of writers showing their archives online is not at all strange for this time. So I think it's something that will continue in the future.
I think that's a great point. I would possibly, maybe offer the argument that authors whose works are still under copyright are still hoping to make money from their works, or their families are still receiving royalties. So, do you think that kind of desire for control will start to lessen over time?
Well, that's a big discussion, a big debate that is really difficult. But I mean, maybe with literature may happen what happened with music. That's been a really problem with music in the last 15 years, because now music is really free or really easy to get, but these companies don't want, or the artists don't want to do it. So, I mean, in a way, but the question is really how much these digital archives can damage the sales of an author. I don't think Garcia Marquez's sales have dropped because you showed his archives online.
Right.
And I don't know how many viewers have read incomplete novels online and decided not to buy the book. So, I mean, the thing is that kind of argument and discussion may be may be in the future like a really huge thing, and that's something we have to wait and see. I hope you're. I imagine you're very interested in that because you work with the digital collection here. But it's something that we need time to see how it goes and how it interferes or not with the physical world. Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. So it's really interesting.
Can you say a little bit about how Garcia Marquez's legacy continues in Colombia? How does the country remember him?
Well, I mean, like in a day like today, his birthday, it's really interesting to see the people, how many people they show their love online, on Twitter, on Facebook, because for many people, he was like a part of their families, actually. I mean, it's not exaggerating, because the way he dealt with family in his books, and also the way he got to know Colombia in so many aspects, and its people, and their customs and everything, is really interesting. How many people feel related to him and see him like a really familiar figure. So, and actually many people who maybe haven't read him that much. Also, when he died, many people were really sad for his death because he had this way of being close to the people. I mean, he wasn't like this intellectual person that that people see as a really man up there who they don't know how to talk to, or no, he was really a man of the people, and he was very good at talking to people on the streets in Bogota, in Cartagena, and I think many people still see him as a similar, not as a superior being or something like that. So for them to remember him is really, really something from the heart, and some people were very sad for his death, and still today people just celebrate him as if he were alive. Sorry.
Do you have any advice for scholars who might want to come to the Ransom Center and apply for a fellowship to do research in the archive?
Do it. No,
Yeah.
because there's so many things to do here. I mean, and so many topics that many scholars can address. I mean, somebody interested in his relationship with the movies and the cinema can find many things here. I mean, scripts, letters, things that never were done, like movies, or people interested in just exploring his relationship with his literary agency, the Carmen Balcells agency, and like the printing world. I mean, all these publishing houses and all his books. There are many clues to study that, to study how people read him, to study his different. I mean, there are many topics that can be studied here in his archives. So it's about just looking at the finding aids you have online, and to think what questions can be asked to that archive. And I'm sure that with a good project that asks the right questions to the archive, the Ransom Center, it would be a great place to visit, and maybe to get a grant from, like I did. So I strongly recommend it.
Good. Well,
So
I think that's it. Do you have any questions for me, or is there anything else that?
no, I mean, I just want to say that being in the Ransom Center was a great experience, and I'm glad the Ransom Center got this Latin American direction with Garcia Marquez, because it's known that it's a really renowned place for archives of writers from Europe or the United States, and now that you have Garcia Marquez's archive, and that you do so many things with Garcia Marquez's archives now, it's really interesting to see in the future how this place of the U.S. will remember the Latin American legacy. I don't have any problem with Garcia Marquez's archive being here or there, because he was actually a universal writer. So I know that he didn't belong just to Colombia; he belonged to the world. So for me, it's not a real problem, and I'm really happy that the Ransom Center, with all its prestige, is now looking toward Latin America. So it's great for me as well.
I'm happy about that too. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Julianne.